Christmas was always my favorite time of year. I grew up believing it meant family, warmth, and love, so when my parents texted me last December saying, "We can't afford Christmas this year, don't come home," my heart sank. I told myself it was fine, that money was tight, that maybe I'd surprise them with some extra cash later. So I sat alone on Christmas Eve, eating takeout by the glow of fairy lights I'd strung up in my tiny apartment. Then, just as I was about to close my laptop, a notification popped up. My sister was live streaming. I've always been the kind of person who clings to rituals. Maybe it's because I grew up in a family where traditions were the only constant in a house full of broken promises. Every December, no matter how hard things had been that year, we would gather in the living room, the pine tree dripping with ornaments collected over decades, and my mom would hum carols while Dad carved the turkey. For a few hours, we pretended that we were a normal family. Those nights were the closest thing to peace I ever knew. So when December rolled around again, I did what I always did. I started preparing. I bought wrapping paper, picked out thoughtful gifts for my niece and nephew, even ordered a cake with little sugar poinsettias on top. My apartment was small, one bedroom, with a leaky radiator that clanked whenever it turned on. But I strung fairy lights around the window and set the table for one, just in case. I had this stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Then, 3 days before Christmas, my phone buzzed. A group message from the family chat lit up the screen. "Dad, kids, this year we can't afford Christmas. Things are tight. No dinner, no gathering, stay home." I read it twice, my stomach sinking like a stone. No Christmas, no laughter, no music, no hugging my niece as she ripped through wrapping paper. I typed back quickly, "Are you sure? I can help with money if that's the problem. I want us to be together." Minutes later, my sister replied with a thumbs up emoji. Then Mom wrote, "Don't worry, honey, it's just too much this year. We'll make it up later." I stared at the messages until the screen went black. My chest ached. I had wired them rent money just 2 months ago when Dad said the mortgage was overdue. I'd skipped buying myself a winter coat to make sure they were okay. And now, no Christmas. I tried to brush it off. "It's fine," I whispered to the empty apartment, though my voice cracked. "It's just one Christmas. I'll order some takeout, light some candles, and watch old movies. It'll be quiet, but it'll be okay." On Christmas Eve, I followed through with the plan. I set out the little cake, poured myself a glass of cheap wine, and queued up Home Alone. The apartment felt both cozy and hollow, the kind of silence that presses on your chest until you have to laugh or cry. I laughed at Kevin's antics on the TV, but my throat tightened anyway. That's when my phone buzzed again. A notification banner slid across the top of the screen. "Emily is live now." For a split second, my heart lifted. Maybe she was just bored. Maybe she wanted to talk. Maybe she missed me too. I clicked. The screen lit up. Music blasted. My niece squealed with delight as she ripped into a giant box covered in glittering wrapping paper. My cousins were clinking champagne glasses. My mother stood by a 12-foot Christmas tree, laughing, her hands full of gifts. My father raised a glass to the camera. My throat went dry. They hadn't been too broke for Christmas. They'd been too willing to lie to keep me away. And that's when I realized I was sitting here alone, eating cold Chinese takeout, while my family, had thrown a luxury party without me. I put my fork down. My hands were trembling. The glow of the fairy lights on my wall felt cruel, like they were mocking me for still believing in something as naive as family. I closed the laptop, trying to shut out the sound of their laughter, but the echo stayed in my ears. I told myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe the party was at a friend's place. Maybe it wasn't even live. My mind scrambled for excuses for them, like I always did, but deep down in the pit of my stomach, I knew. They had lied. They had chosen joy, abundance, celebration without me. I curled up on the couch, hugging my knees, the untouched cake staring back at me from the table. The lights flickered again. My phone buzzed, a call. The name on the screen made my breath hitch. Dad. My thumb hovered over the accept button. Was this the explanation I had been hoping for, or just another request, another lie wrapped in guilt? I didn't know yet, but I pressed answer. My finger trembled as I tapped the glowing notification. The video expanded to fill my laptop screen, and for a moment I thought I had clicked the wrong thing. This wasn't some random influencer's holiday party. No, I recognized the garland wrapped around the banister. I recognized the fireplace with the crooked family portrait above it. It was my parents' house. The camera shook a little before focusing on my younger sister, Emily. She was dressed in a glittering silver dress I knew wasn't cheap, holding a glass of champagne, laughing into her phone as she panned around the room. Behind her, our cousins were huddled together, ripping open brightly colored wrapping paper. Piles of gifts lined the tree. The living room sparkled with gold ornaments and white fairy lights, the kind Mom always splurged on. Someone shouted, "Best Christmas ever," and everyone cheered. My breath caught in my throat. I stared, frozen, at the screen. Just 3 days ago, Mom had texted me, "We can't afford Christmas this year, don't come home." And here they were, celebrating without me, living in the very house they said was too empty and sad to decorate. A wave of heat rushed up my neck, then coldness spread through me like ice water. I remembered how I had told myself not to be upset, how I'd convinced myself they just couldn't afford it. I had even felt guilty for not sending them more money, as if my absence was a burden they couldn't carry. But this wasn't a quiet, canceled holiday. This was a party, a lavish one. My niece squealed again as my brother-in-law wheeled in a brand new bike with a red ribbon tied around the handlebars. The comment section lit up with heart emojis, clapping hands. "So cute," and "You guys look amazing." I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. The food on their table made the lukewarm Chinese takeout in front of me look pathetic. A roasted turkey glistened with butter. Plates of shrimp cocktail and chocolate truffles covered every inch of the dining table. My dad, wearing his favorite Christmas sweater, raised his glass again, his face flushed from wine and laughter. And yet, 3 days ago, he'd told me they couldn't afford anything. My heart thudded painfully. I could still hear his voice from that phone call in November. "Sweetheart, we're short on rent. Could you send us $600 just this once?" I had wired it the next day, even though it meant skipping a new coat for winter and surviving on ramen noodles for weeks. I thought back to other years, the time Mom called me at midnight, crying about the electric bill, the time Emily texted me, saying her kids wouldn't have school supplies without my help. And every single time, I reached for my savings, transferring money before I even asked questions. I told myself, they need me. I'm the only one who made it out. It's my duty. But staring at that screen, seeing the clinking champagne glasses and the expensive decorations, I realized the truth. They never needed me. They just used me. I wasn't the beloved daughter or the adored older sister. I was the bank. A lump rose in my throat, but this time I didn't swallow it down. I let the tears fall hot and bitter, my hand covering my mouth to muffle the sound. The fairy lights around my window twinkled, throwing shadows across the floor. The apartment felt smaller and colder with every laugh that came from that screen. I shut the laptop with a snap, but the silence that followed was even louder. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out from the inside. I sat there alone with the takeout container, feeling foolish, discarded, invisible. For years, I had been the one to bridge the gaps, to buy the gifts, to pay the bills, to make sure Christmas happened. And now that I couldn't, I was cut out, erased. The realization hurt more than I expected. I tried to convince myself again. Maybe it wasn't their money. Maybe someone else paid. Maybe. But every excuse sounded weaker than the last. I knew my family too well. If they had been truly struggling, there would have been no champagne, no catered food, no sparkling tree, taller than the doorway. I sat there, hugging my knees tighter, breathing through the ache in my chest. The city outside was muffled in snow, quiet, almost peaceful. For a fleeting moment, I thought, maybe being alone is better than being lied to. And then, my phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. The screen lit up, and I saw the name. Dad. I froze, staring at it, my tears still wet on my cheeks. My heart pounded. Was this the explanation I had been hoping for, or just another lie? Hello? My voice cracked when I answered, my throat still raw from holding back tears. On the other end, Dad's voice came through, thick with emotion. Sweetheart, it's your father. I didn't want to bother you on Christmas, but we're in trouble. Things are worse than I thought. We need your help. I closed my eyes. I knew it. The pit in my stomach widened. What kind of trouble? I asked, though I already feared the answer. He sighed heavily, as if carrying the weight of the world. We're behind on bills again. They're threatening to shut off the heat, and I owe some money. About $3,800. If you could just send it, I promise I'll pay you back. You know we wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. $3,800. I nearly dropped my phone. That was more than my rent, more than my entire savings right now. I had already emptied my account in November. Dad, I whispered, my voice trembling. I thought you said you couldn't afford Christmas. That's why I didn't come. There was a pause, too long. Then his voice sharpened. We couldn't. We had to put everything into bills. Your sister's friend helped out. That's why there was food. Don't twist it. I stared at the closed laptop on my coffee table. My hands moved on their own, flipping it open again, my pulse hammering in my ears. The livestream was still running. My niece was riding her new bike in circles around the living room. My sister was laughing, champagne glass in hand. My mother was smiling as she accepted a new gold bracelet from my father. The chat was flooded with comments about how rich and fancy the party looked. I held the phone closer to the speaker. Listen, I said, pressing play. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter filled the call. Does this sound like no Christmas to you? Silence. Then a sharp inhale. You're spying on us? That's sick. My jaw tightened. Spying? You told me not to come. You said you couldn't afford anything. And yet, there's a 12-foot tree in the living room. There's a new bike, jewelry, food for 20 people. And I'm here, eating cold lo mein out of a box because I thought you had nothing." His voice, once pleading, turned venomous. "You don't understand. We needed help. Your mother and I have sacrificed everything for you kids, and this is how you repay us? By accusing us? By withholding money when we're drowning?" The audacity made my vision blur with rage. They weren't drowning. They were celebrating without me. Every dollar I sent, every time I skipped meals so they could have theirs, every bill I paid on their behalf. It was all so they could put on a show for the neighbors, for Facebook, for everyone but me. I felt something shift inside me. The little girl who always longed for her father's approval, who always hoped this Christmas would be different. She stood up and walked out. What remained was me, older, tired, done. I took a deep breath and steadied my voice. "Dad," I said slowly, "I've covered your bills. I've bought gifts for the kids. I've said yes every time you asked for help. And then, when I needed you the most, you lied to me. You didn't want me there because I wouldn't bankroll your party." "Don't you dare talk to me like that," he snapped. "After everything I've done for you, you can't even help us this once? You're ungrateful. You think you're better than us because you make money? You're still nothing without family. We're all you've got." I looked at the screen again. My sister had switched the camera to show off the mountain of presents under the tree. My cousin typed in the chat, "Where's your sister? Didn't she come?" Emily laughed it off, saying, "She couldn't make it. She's too busy." My chest burned. I thought about the nights I stayed awake, working 2 jobs just to send money. I thought about the time I cried in the bathroom, wondering if they loved me for who I was or only for what I could give. And suddenly it was so clear. "Dad," I said, my voice steadier now, "I'm not your bank account. I'm your daughter. And if money is the only reason you keep me around, then you don't get me at all." "Don't be ridiculous," he barked, but there was a crack in his voice, sharp with anger, and was that fear? I didn't care anymore. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart was racing, but for once, it wasn't from dread. It was from resolve. "I'm done," I said quietly, every syllable laced with a strength I didn't know I had. "I won't fund liars anymore." And then I pressed end call. The line went dead. The apartment filled with silence again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt final, like the last page of a chapter. My phone vibrated again on the table, buzzing angrily against the wood. I glanced down. Another incoming call. Dad's number. My breath caught. My hand hovered over the phone. Do I answer? Do I let him twist me up again? Or is this the moment I finally break free? The screen kept flashing. My heart thudded in my ears, and then black. The call ended with a hollow click. I stared at the black screen of my phone, waiting for the guilt to consume me, waiting for the familiar rush of panic that usually followed whenever I dared to deny my father anything. But instead, there was only silence, a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. For the first time in years, there were no follow-up texts flooding my phone, no guilt-tripping messages, no frantic voicemails, just nothing. The quiet was unsettling, almost eerie. I had begged for peace, for space, and now that it stretched around me like a heavy blanket, I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. I picked at the carton of cold lo mein on the table, the noodles sticking together in a greasy clump. The fairy lights I'd strung around the window twinkled half-heartedly. their glow unable to fill the hollowness in my chest. The silence gave me too much room to think, too much space for memories to crawl back in. I remembered being 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on that same living room carpet I'd just seen on the live stream. Mom had made her famous gingerbread cookies, and Dad had carried me on his shoulders to hang the star at the very top of the tree. Emily had clapped for me like I was some kind of hero. Back then, we were all together, even if money was tight. Back then, love felt real. So when did it all change? Was it when I got into college and started sending home every spare dollar from my part-time jobs? Was it when Emily had her first child and suddenly I wasn't the baby anymore, just the reliable wallet? Or had this been their plan all along, to keep me tethered to them with guilt and obligations? I set down the chopsticks and pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes. The sting of tears returned, but this time it wasn't just sadness, it was shame. Shame that I had been so easy to manipulate. Shame that I'd believed every story about overdue bills, every sob about being broke. Shame that I'd missed Christmas with them because I thought they were too poor to celebrate, when in reality I was the only one not worth inviting. The loneliness wrapped tighter around me, like icy vines climbing my chest. I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe they had their reasons. Maybe they didn't want me to feel pressured to spend money. Maybe, but no. I remembered the look on Emily's face in the video, the way she laughed when someone asked about me. "She's too busy," she had said. Too busy. Not too caring, not too generous, just too busy. As if I had chosen to stay away. I curled into the corner of the couch, the dim light flickering on my face, and whispered into the empty room. Was I wrong to hope? Was I wrong to believe in them? The question echoed in my head, heavier with each repetition. I thought about the years I'd lost, the holidays spent working overtime so I could wire money home, the birthdays where my gift was the only one on the table, the excuses they made whenever I asked why they never visited me. Too far, too expensive, too busy, always something. And here I was, 29 years old, with no one to share this tiny apartment with. I had sacrificed so much for a family that didn't want me unless my name was attached to a bank transfer. The silence stretched on until it became unbearable. I got up, carried the half-eaten carton to the sink, and rinsed it out just to give my hands something to do. The water was lukewarm, like everything else tonight. I leaned on the counter, watching the city lights shimmer through the frosted window. Somewhere out there, people were gathered with their families, laughing, eating, bickering, forgiving. And here I stood, a ghost in my own life. For a moment, I thought maybe this was how it would always be. Me, orbiting around my family like a satellite, never truly part of their warmth, only useful for what I could provide. Then, just as I was sinking deeper into that thought, I heard it, a sharp knock at the door. I froze, my wet hands dripping onto the counter. No one ever visited me unannounced. My heart kicked into a sprint. Another knock, louder this time. I hesitated, fear and hope crashing together in my chest. My eyes darted to the peephole. A figure stood outside in the snow, bundled in a coat, shifting their weight from foot to foot. I recognized the shape instantly. It was someone I knew. But why were they here, on Christmas night? I reached for the doorknob, pulse hammering again, wondering if I was about to open the door to comfort or to another betrayal. The door creaked open, and there she was, Maya, my oldest friend since high school. bundled in a ridiculous red scarf and holding a bakery box. Snowflakes clung to her hair like tiny stars. "Merry Christmas, loner," she grinned, stepping past me before I could protest. "You didn't think I was going to let you spend tonight by yourself, did you?" I blinked at her, speechless for a moment. My throat was still tight from crying, my face probably blotchy, but she didn't comment. Instead, she set the box on the table and pulled out 2 steaming cups from a paper bag. Peppermint hot chocolate, extra whipped cream, and a gingerbread cake because, well, you always used to steal mine in high school. A laugh escaped me, small and broken, but real. I hadn't expected anyone, let alone someone who remembered the little things. "You didn't have to do this." "Of course I did," she said, dropping onto my couch and patting the seat beside her. "Now sit, we're not letting you spiral tonight." For the next hour, we sipped hot chocolate and picked at the cake, while Home Alone played in the background. Maya cracked jokes about Kevin's traps, making me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. For the first time that evening, I felt warmth, not from the radiator, but from being seen, from being valued for who I was, not for the money in my account. It felt like a fragile little pocket of peace, and I wanted to live there forever. But peace never lasted long in my family. My laptop pinged. I ignored it at first, not wanting to break the spell, but Maya nudged me. Might be important. Reluctantly, I opened it. An email notification glowed on the screen. My sister's name in bold letters. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." My chest tightened. I clicked it open, my heart already softening against my better judgment. Maybe she regretted it. Maybe she realized how much it hurt me to be excluded. Maybe. The message began sweetly enough. "Sis, I didn't mean to hurt you. I know you must feel left out, but you have to understand, we only wanted to protect you from the stress. We love you. I'm so sorry if it came across wrong." For a split second, my shoulders dropped in relief. There it was, the apology I'd been craving, the acknowledgement that I mattered. But then my eyes caught the next line. "By the way, Dad is really struggling. I've set up a GoFundMe to help with the $3,800 debt. If you could be the first to donate, others will follow your lead. Here's the link." I blinked, read it again. And again, the words twisted in my chest like knives. This wasn't an apology. This was marketing. They had dressed up a plea for money with a cheap apology, hoping guilt would open my wallet one more time. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. Maya frowned. "What is it?" I turned the laptop toward her. She read in silence, her expression darkening. "Are you kidding me?" she muttered. "They're using you like a sponsor, like you're not their daughter, but some ATM with feelings they can exploit." The tears that had threatened earlier burned again, but they didn't fall. I felt something different rising inside me now. Not weakness, not grief. A solid wall of anger, tempered by clarity. All these years I thought I was helping, that if I just gave a little more, proved myself a little harder, they'd finally see me, love me, invite me in, but they never intended to. To them, I wasn't family, I was financing. I picked up my phone again. The unanswered call from Dad still blinked on the screen. Beneath it, new notifications from unknown numbers piled up. Probably them, trying from other lines. I ignored those too. Maya placed a hand over mine. "What are you going to do?" I stared at the email, my mind racing. For the first time in years, I felt the fog of guilt lifting. replaced by a strange, almost serene determination. "I'm going to stop pretending," I whispered. "If they want to play this game, fine, but I'm not their pawn anymore." I highlighted my sister's email, dragged it into a new folder, and labeled it proof. My fingers didn't shake this time. They felt steady, deliberate, like I'd been waiting my whole life to finally say no. Then, without a word, I opened a blank email. My hands hovered over the keyboard. The room was still quiet, except for the faint sound of laughter from the movie. I could feel Maya's eyes on me. She didn't speak, just nodded as if to say, "Do what you need to do. I'm here." I took a deep breath, placed my fingers on the keys, and began to type. The cursor blinked at me like a metronome, steady, patient, waiting. My father's missed call still glowed on the lock screen, but for once I didn't feel that old panic. I felt strangely calm, as if my body had finally decided enough was enough. I started typing. Line after line, I poured everything out. Dates, amounts, screenshots of my bank transfers. Even the link Emily had sent with her so-called apology. I didn't embellish, I didn't rant, I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. "Dear everyone," I began. "I'm writing this because I've realized you don't know the whole story. For years, I have been sending money home whenever Dad or Emily said they needed it. Rent, bills, school supplies, emergencies. In the past 2 years alone, I've sent more than $15,000. I did it because I love you all, and because I thought we were family." My fingers moved faster, tapping out every time they had asked, every receipt I had, every promise of repayment that never came. I attached screenshots of bank statements, of Emily's email with the fundraising link. I even described the Christmas Eve I had just lived through, alone in my apartment, while watching their party unfold on my sister's livestream. They told me they were too broke to celebrate. They told me not to come. I sat alone while they laughed without me. And then Dad called, asking me for $3,800. All I can say is, I am done. I am not an ATM. I am not your scapegoat. I am not your fool. By the time I hit send, my hands no longer trembled. There was a strange, hollow ache in my chest, but it was lined with steel. The next day, the explosion came. My phone, despite my blocks, lit up with messages from relatives who had received my email. Some were shocked, some were furious, not at me, but at my parents. I always wondered how they could afford those vacations, one cousin wrote. Another messaged me privately. "I'm so sorry, they borrowed money from me too. I thought I was the only one." For the first time, I wasn't the scapegoat. The web of lies my family had spun for years was unraveling in front of everyone. My father's voice had been full of anger when I last spoke to him, but now his words were different, desperate. He called from another number, his voice hoarse, almost pleading. "Sweetheart, you don't understand. I only wanted to give your sister a good Christmas. You know how much she's been struggling. Please, we can talk about this. Just don't turn everyone against us." His words washed over me, but they didn't pierce like before. For once, I heard the manipulation for what it was, a script. The same one I'd been fed since I was a teenager. I sat on my couch, staring out at the snow that still fell in lazy flakes outside my window. "Dad," I said quietly, "I didn't turn anyone against you. The truth did that. I just showed them what you didn't want them to see." He cursed under his breath. "You'll regret this. Family is all you have. When your friends are gone, when you're alone, who will be there for you? Not them, only us. I swallowed, the weight in my chest finally lifting. If that's true, then I'd rather be alone. Because at least alone, I know I'm not being lied to. Before he could answer, I hung up. This time, I didn't hesitate. I blocked the new number. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. A year passed. December arrived again, and with it, the familiar bite of winter. But this time, the fairy lights in my apartment didn't feel like a mockery. They felt like a promise. My little living room was filled with the scent of cinnamon candles, trays of cookies cooling on the counter, and laughter that wasn't forced. Maya sat cross-legged on the rug, helping my niece, yes, my niece, put together a gingerbread house. After my email, my sister's ex had reached out privately, apologizing for what his kids had endured. He wanted them to have someone reliable in their lives. Slowly, tentatively, he began to let me visit them. Tonight, for the first time, they were spending Christmas Eve at my apartment. The kids had flour on their noses, giggling as they tried to stick candy canes into the gingerbread roof. My small table was covered in mismatched plates, but each one overflowed with food I had cooked myself. Lasagna, roasted vegetables, warm bread. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It was mine. As I watched them, a soft warmth spread through me. This was what family should feel like. People who showed up because they wanted to, not because they needed something. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I didn't even look. I slid it under a magazine and turned back to the laughter in my living room. Later, when the kids were asleep and the candles had burned low, I sat with my journal open on the kitchen table. My pen moved slowly, deliberately. Last year, I thought Christmas had died for me. I thought family was something I lost. But tonight I learned something different. Family isn't just blood. Family is the people who choose you, who stand beside you without asking for a price. I don't need to buy love anymore. I am enough, exactly as I am. I set the pen down, closed the journal, and let out a long breath I felt I'd been holding for years. The silence that had once suffocated me now felt like peace, and when I looked at the twinkling lights by my window, I didn't feel the emptiness anymore. I felt something else entirely: hope.